Hi guys, thanks for tuning into the video. This one here is going to be quite different to my tutorial videos. This is actually going to be predominantly a negative video. I just wanted to put it out there. I don't normally do negative videos. I did in the past run a website where we did do negative reviews of the video games industry. I don't do it much anymore because there's just no point to it now. Social media does a good enough job of giving negative reviews to things now anyway. And I don't really like the way social media takes the negative reviews and blows things out of proportion, stuff like that. Like you can see with Fallout 76 at the moment, I believe it's a good game, and I think it's copping a lot of flack that it shouldn't be. But that's a completely different topic for another video that I may put together at one stage. This one here is actually about the Unity Asset Store, some of the marketing tactics and some of the customer service that I've dealt with the Unity Asset Store, as well as an asset that I've purchased recently that I'm not too happy with the service, and it highlighted a few more issues that I found with the Unity Asset Store. I just want to iterate that this is actually my opinion. I don't mind if you disagree with some of the points that I raise, and feel free to comment about them on the video itself. That's perfectly fine. And I can address that in conversation with people through the comments. The issues that I've come across are actually ones that have sort of, I don't know how widespread they are outside of me. The issues were pretty much specific to my dealings with the Unity Asset Store. And I wouldn't normally go down the length of trying to argue it or trying to, again, create this negative review. But I just feel like it's happened enough now that I would actually like to raise some of the issues on there, and actually even just get some feedback from the audience as well. So people that watch this video, let me know what you think of the situation, and yeah, by all means, give me feedback. That being said, the asset that I'm going to raise that I've given a bad review to, and the reason why I'm putting it on the video here, I don't have any ill feelings towards the developer themselves or anything like that, so I don't want any kind of negative action. I'm not saying don't buy their product ever, let's abandon them, anything like that. By all means, make up your own opinion on the asset itself and the conversations that were had in the support forum, and from that, just judge on what you want. Again, the issue is between myself and the asset developer. But I believe that it has some merits to what I'm saying, and I'm going to explain that as I go on with the video. For the Unity Asset Store itself, look, I mean, I use Unity. It's the easiest platform to get in on for game development. I do a lot of videos on the thing. I don't use Unreal Editor anymore. I did do a little bit of that a while back, but I was a bit more difficult to break into the game development with, and Unity's a lot easier. There's a lot of bad stuff floating around on the Unity Asset Store, but there's also a lot of good assets and a lot of good products there, and the community itself is actually really great for learning and teaching new things. So that being said, let's just get into the first part. I want to start out with my dealings with the Unity Asset Store. The first problems that I was really having was based on the web store system that they had. They just brought out a new website, and part of the mechanics of that is that when you hit the landing page, especially on a mobile browser, you would go to the new store and load it up, even though I'd already been logged in as the old store with a user account. The user account doesn't translate over to the new store. I would always be having to log in. Those sorts of issues are just sort of minor gripes that I had with it. It was enough to make it real finicky whenever I wanted to try and use the mobile phone to browse the website. But then it started happening on the web browser too, on a desktop. So I was a little bit annoyed at that. But what had happened is there were a few assets that I was going to buy, and this happened more than once, where I would be on the old store shopping on the mobile browser. I would be logged in, I put something in the cart. As soon as I click on the purchase the items in the cart, it would then load up the new storefront and cause me some grief there because I'd have to re-log in, and then it would say purchase with PayPal. So I would click on the PayPal option because I was using it because I have two separate accounts linked to the PayPal, and it lets me choose which bank account that I want to withdraw those funds from to purchase it. The problem is that the new store has a system that allows you to do the automatic payment with PayPal, where it automatically selects the account. However, the button prompt for that is the same as the regular PayPal button. There's no indication that it's going to be the faster checkout option. So I would be buying with PayPal expecting to hit the prompt to log into PayPal and then to actually purchase the item from the account that I want to purchase from. But what was occurring was that it was going straight through to the preloaded data that it already had, even though on my old store account I made sure that that was not a function, so it actually had the box unchecked. But apparently on the new store it automatically checked it to the last used PayPal option, or the PayPal Express, I think it was called. And it happened once, and I thought, okay, well, maybe I just didn't have a setting right, whatever. I contacted them though, and I said, hey, look, this has happened. There must be an issue with the site because I was logged into the old store, and then it prompted me to, it automatically put me on the new store when I went to check out, and it's charged the wrong account basically, and now I've faced an extra charge on that account due to the way that account's set up for processing the fees. They said sorry, basically couldn't do much. But yeah, I made note of it, and I'm like, that's all right. Just make sure that you have someone look into the way the store works so that it doesn't follow that thing again. But it did happen again, and it happened a second time, and this time it was actually more money, and it was sent through to the wrong account, and it charged extra on the amount. So I've contacted them again and said, this is the second time. I shouldn't have to keep complaining about this, but this is how it works. The feedback that I was getting from the customer service was, we're talking about like 10 or 15 emails from these people back and forth, where I was trying to explain the scenario, and each time they would send me back a reply that didn't make sense to what I was saying. They were trying to argue a completely different thing, and I believe it was an issue of English as a second language. The concepts I was trying to get across, I can understand. I've spoken to people that have English as a second language and might not know it quite as strongly, and trying to get ideas across can sometimes fall flat. So I had to explain myself several times, and I actually went through several people at one stage to get a response, until it was finally put down that yes, all right, so they understood that the problem is that I was being automatically redirected to the new store, which was causing the Express PayPal option to appear in place of the regular PayPal option. And I pointed out to them with screenshots and everything too, is that, no, look, this is the button that shows up. It doesn't actually show the PayPal Express option, it just says PayPal. They finally conceded that yes, it was a fault with their system, and I would have to contact the department that handles the web store. So I've already contacted the customer service line to tell them what's going on, but I would then have to contact another section of Unity that handles the web store development. And I'm like, well, that's silly. Why can't I need to then go and find? They didn't actually give me the link to the people I needed to contact. I have to go and find their contact details and then send it to them, as opposed to them being a part of Unity just sending directly. So that's already annoying enough. Now, the other problem is they sent me a marketing email that actually had an error in it during the autumn sales and things like that, or it was the monthly sales that they had, or the monthly specials, where you buy X amount, or you spend X amount of money on the Unity store, and you'll get certain products from it, or certain assets automatically given to you. The majority of them are already actually owned, but I believe the first month that come along, I ended up spending about enough money to get all of the items, and that was pretty good. I thought it was actually a pretty good deal, and I liked the specials that they had. The next time though, a couple of the items they had were, I'd already owned both of them, but they were the licensed ones. So it's the one seat gets you so you buy a license for every seat that you have on your development team. So if you're a solo person, you just need one. If you have more than one person on your team, then you need to buy that asset license several times in order to cover the amount of people you have working on your team. It was something that's got brought in quite recently, actually, to the Unity store, and it makes, for the most part, it makes sense. But more on that later. Basically, those two items, I thought, hey, that would be all right if I got those. I don't really want to spend the extra money, though, because I don't need anything. But then they sent me an email that said, I've already spent X amount, and I only need to spend $9 more to unlock those new assets. Now, when I looked, I'd only actually spent an amount that would unlock me the first two assets, and then the other two might come if I spend an extra, $10 or something like that. So it wasn't even the number that they'd sent me. But when I got that email, it told me that if I spent the $9, I would get all six assets unlocked for the month. So I went and did that. I went and spent the $9 thinking that was actually a good deal. I don't know why it didn't align with what they were advertising elsewhere. I thought maybe because I was part of, so I've spent that much money on the Unity Asset Store, they did it as a nicety. But of course, I put through the money and I didn't get all the 6 assets. So I contacted them over that again. And again, there was a back and forth between us where they couldn't understand the problem. They kept telling me that, like, no, you have to spend this amount. And I said, okay, I understand that you want me to spend that amount, but you've sent me an email saying that if I spend this amount, I will get those assets. And so I actually spent that amount. I wouldn't have spent it normally. I actually bought just a couple of small assets that I was just going to tinker with. I didn't really want them. And of course, it's a small amount of money, so it's not a huge deal. But in the principle of it, it is a huge deal because that's money that I wouldn't have spent in the first place. So they've gone and told me something and then not, like, advertised something to me, but then not delivered on it. And I tried complaining to them. I tried saying, look, you have given me the stuff that I've paid for, yes, but I only paid for it because I was told by your company that I would get these extra assets. It turned into a big back and forth, and at one stage they actually had sent a reply, assuming that I'd had the other assets and I was trying to get more copies of them. And I'm like, no, that's not what I'm after. But they told me that because I own those assets already, and as far as I'm aware, they're not part of the license per chair, I was actually allowed to share those assets around with anyone else who is on my team. Which, the way it was worded, was actually quite tantamount to asset piracy, which is a big no-no for someone from Unity to be saying that customer service-wise. And I sent back an email going, are you serious? Basically, was my reaction. Like, did you just condone me handing out free assets to people? And yeah, sure enough, they said that, at that point there was a break in the communication. I didn't reply for a while, and then I finally got a reply from someone else that looked like they were higher up in the chain, and I believe that they were more localized to, they were better at speaking English and understood the concepts better. So I assume that it may have been an issue with the way they have their customer service teams or whatever might be outsourced somewhere that doesn't have a strong English background. And on that too, Unity is from Denmark, I believe. So, I mean, English is predominant throughout Europe, but do they need to have English as the primary language for customer service? No, I don't really expect it, but I think that with their dealings, there'd be a lot of people that would expect to communicate in English and have these concepts pass through. That's an aside. The customer service agent contacted me back and said, oh, no, we're not condoning piracy, but the way that the licensing works is that, yes, you are able to share these assets with your team. Now, effectively what that means is that any asset you get that isn't part of the license per seat can actually be traded to other people. I'll use another term than traded. You can actually send a copy of that asset to anyone else that is declared as on your development team in order to develop your project. And that's technically not piracy. The issue there is that can then be exploited because those people can be on your team for all of the time that it takes to pass that asset over, and then they can leave. Now they've got a copy of that asset. Can they use it legally in a game? Well, not really. If they make a game or if they're using a project that they didn't purchase that asset for, there's not really an excuse, but it's very much a grey area because once they have a copy of that asset, the asset developer and perhaps even Unity would then have to prove that they don't own a copy of it, but because there are more places than one to get the assets off the Unity Asset Store, you can obviously go direct to the developer in most cases and purchase off them. You could purchase it from a third-party pack like the Humble Bundle giveaways. Unity would have to monitor that, and it becomes difficult. But again, this was a pretty serious claim by Unity that was almost, but sort of saving face by not condoning piracy, but very close to condoning piracy. Which is why I understand that they've bought in this idea of the license per seat. A lot of times the license per seat's annoying because it's on the more expensive assets that come through, which when you're buying per seat, it makes it a lot more difficult for smaller teams that are just doing sort of hobby project stuff, kind of like what I do. to actually work on the project, because then you're paying already something like $80 for Vegetation Studio, which is a brilliant asset, really great for when you're developing 3D worlds and stuff like that, and you want to put your foliage out there. Yeah, really promote that asset. That's a great one. Grab that. Good customer service too. But when you're starting to make a team of, say, 3 people, well, then that's 3 of those licenses that you need to have in order to make your game and then actually sell it, because otherwise you're selling it with an unlicensed copy because you have 2 other people in your team that are using it. Now, I guess you could probably work around it if you only had 1 person in the team working with that asset to develop the world. Everyone else is working on a separate project that will then lay over the top, but that becomes a lot iffier when you're trying to do collab projects. So that's where I sort of I think it's both a good and a bad thing. But that's fine. But yeah, the main gripes I had with the Unity store was again just the customer service was really bad, and then the glitches that I have in the store, or the improper sort of forwarding you to the new store, and it's happening a lot more and more now, which I think they're trying to push people to going into the new store and getting rid of the old one. It's just unfortunate that the old one's a lot more stable and a lot more user friendly than the new one is. I find the new one to be really annoying. It's hard to find any of the new products that come out unless they're featured. And then that brings me actually to another subject, which I'll probably get into first before I get into my interactions with the asset that I wanted to explain the bad review for. Marketing. So there's a lot of assets on the Unity Asset Store, and there's a lot of them that are really subpar assets, and you can usually tell them straight off because they have really bad marketing pages. Whether that's just because they haven't put in any effort, whether they don't know to put in effort, or whether they just don't care, or whether it's just because you can tell right off the bat that it's just not a quality product. You can usually spot that, but then there's times where you can get trapped. Now, this asset that I purchased that I gave the bad review for, I felt like it was a bit of a trap. It's difficult because the asset developer themselves are actually a prominent asset developer for Unity. They've been around for a while, and they've also had a decent asset, 2D asset that has been spruiked by Unity for quite some time, and it's led to some alright 2D platformer games, but this new one come out and it had the fancy marketing for it. And everything was written up. It looked nice. They had a trailer for it. They had full documentation you could look through. I say full with quotation marks there. And everything looked like it was upfront and transparent. But when I actually got the asset, it didn't turn out the way I thought it was. By the way that it was advertised, it seemed to be a lot more difficult to understand and a lot different to what I was expecting. Those expectations, they were made from basically the way it was marketed, but also the way other Unity assets are marketed when we're talking about systems and templates. You look at something like the Invector template that I've been using for the tutorial series. Now, that's a pretty full-on template. There's a lot of complexity to it, but it's also made user-friendly so that things can be dropped into wizards, all sorts of stuff like that to make it easy to get something up and running. You can use the demo scenes, or you can chuck in your own products or your own art pieces to put it through, and you can quite quickly set up a basic scene and get it going. And the reason why that's good is because the reason that makes it so easy is because they actually do have wizards built into their template, which you can use to then create things. They've also got decent documentation, but most importantly, they've got tutorial videos that actually show you not just how the engine works, but how to actually use it when you're trying to create something with it. Now, this this asset that I purchased seemed to advertise that it had those sorts of features, or maybe not a wizard so much, but it did actually claim that it has tutorial videos. It turns out it actually doesn't have tutorial videos. The documentation was claimed to be full, but most of the documentation, most of the important parts of it, it basically utilises several other systems that are developed by Unity, like the Cinemachine. The documentation just says Cinemachine documentation is way better than what I can do. So it just directs you to the documentation that Unity has made, which is, you know, in some respects fair. But that's a lot of documentation to go through when all you really need is just the info of how that Cinemachine ties in with the system itself and how to utilize it for what you want. So rather than having to learn an entire different system and then port that over yourself into this engine, you just need the information of how to get it to work with that engine. And it is fairly simple, but again, the documentation just directs you somewhere else. So let's just have a look at what I mean, and part of the marketing, we'll look at the marketing aspect first, because that's what I want to sort of go over at the moment. So I'm just going to bring that up. So this is the asset here. Again, please make up your own decision. Look through the marketing, look at the documentation, listen to the video, and then some of the things that some of the issues that I raise with it, and then make up your own decision as to whether you think it's worth your time for purchasing it. If you were looking at this before, I gave it a bad review. I only gave it 2 stars because of the culmination of a bunch of different points that I'll go over in this. But again, I'm not trying to tell you not to purchase from this developer. I'm just trying to lay out some of the issues that I've had here. So this is it. It's a top-down engine. As you can see here, the top-down engine is the most complete top-down solution for Unity. From the creator of the acclaimed Corgi engine, it's the best top-down action framework out there. Whether you're new to Unity or an experienced developer, clean code, good practices, optimizations, its strong foundations allow for the creation of both 2D and 3D top-down games. It's very fast and works on desktop, mobile, and anywhere you want. Packed with features, built with player feedback and great game feel at its core. Remember that part. And constantly updated. It's the best tool to create 2D or 3D top-down game that actually feel good. Okay, well, there's a little bit of poor English in that one, but that's fine. Grammatically anyway. They've got a complete features list which takes you to their website that shows you a bit more. In fact, I can even I'll open that up and we'll have a look at that in a sec. It's got a demo that you can play with, so you can actually see what the demo scene feels like, which is good. It's got the link to the documentation videos. Let's actually open that in a new tab as well, and then a forum which links you to the support forum on Unity forums, that is, and then a support, which is obviously a support email or to the support page of their website. It then goes on to say what it includes, and for what it's worth, what it says that it includes, it does include. So it's actually, they're upfront about what's included in the system itself. I have no complaints there. It definitely does what it says it's going to do. Some of the complaints that I have are just about other things. So first off, let's just have a look down here. You can grab it, you want to give it a try, you got the demo, all that sort of stuff. Getting started, you can have a start by looking at the functional documentation, which covers all aspects of top-down engine. I disagree with that, but that's fine. There's also a complete documentation for all classes, which are heavily commented, so it's very easy to understand and improve on as long as you have a basic Unity understanding. Okay, before you said it was sort of like for new users, so the expectation there is that new users could come in and it would be very user-friendly, very much a drop-and-play scenario, although the words drop-and-play weren't put in there, so I guess that's, you know, in a sense it's very much open to interpretation there. If you don't want to get into code, there's still a lot you can do in the you can do in the inspector by replacing assets. That's what I find to be not true, unless your assets are very specifically designed. There are also video tutorials to get you started, and again, this link goes to the YouTube page. So let's have a look at the YouTube page. These are the tutorials that we've got. So we've got a release trailer, which just highlights some of the features on it in like a little swisho, marketing video. Then you've got the tour, which is basically 25 minutes of the guy going through the scenes, explaining what's in the scenes, not actually showing you how to replicate the scenes or set anything up. From what I recall of going through it, I don't recall seeing that at all, at least not anyway outside of what's already there in the demo scenes. When you compare it to something like the Invector template, we've got here Invector template, how to create generic actions. So this here is a 5-minute clip, but it shows you actually how to put the pieces together when you go through. I'll try and speed this up too. So you can sort of come through, you can see he's actually in the editor, he's going through, seeing how the step up works, talking about the actual script itself. This is the focus script for the part. Going through how to implement it, talking about the animations, all the components that make up this item, how to place them in, step by step, how to do it. This is a tutorial. this is how you put out a tutorial explaining something. So when you say there's video tutorials, this is what people expect to see. But what we see is a tour and a release trailer, so not a tutorial on how to use the different parts. So going back to that, so let's have a look. Player abilities, it says here, this is just basic spiels about how they work, the demo levels, advanced AI for your enemies and friends. Yeah, I haven't looked too much into it. Advanced weapons and inventory. I have some gripes with the way the inventory is set up. I don't think it's very comfortable gaming at all, or game feedback in mind, whatever you want to call it. Feedback and game feel, that's the one. I feel like there's a few issues with it, but that's all about inputs, and I'm sure you can modify that. Striving for excellence. So focuses on excellence, Unity good practice, and state-of-the-art coding and structure. No exception is fully documented and commented. Well, it's fully commented. I will say that the scripts do have a lot of comments in it. I couldn't find the part in the script that I wanted because I think it was in a different script and just linked in for like the editor scripts. Fully documented, well, no, I would definitely disagree with that, and I'll go through some of the documentation in a minute. Both, yeah, a great place to start if you're new at Unity, and a great foundation if you're a seasoned developer. If you're a seasoned developer, yeah, sure, you'll get this fine. If you're brand new at Unity, you will have to learn a lot about Unity, all the different aspects of Unity, from the animator to Cinemachine and a bunch of the other solutions that Unity have for different things. And Pixel Perfect, I think, is the other one. It doesn't really explain that for you. So everything you need to create amazing levels. Yeah, if you want to use the assets built in, if you want to use your own assets. And mobile friendly, I haven't tried it on a mobile yet. It looks like it runs smooth. That's great. Legal restrictions. So yeah, all the music you can't use. That's perfectly fine. I don't even remember hearing any music in it anyway. The sound effects aren't there except for, I think, the clicking in the thing. I don't remember hearing gunshots, things like that. Or I think it maybe is only gunshots, but nothing else. Then you can play the demo. And so you can use all the visual assets for the games. That might be a bit tricky though, because I think a lot of them are from a game dev site where they have implications. Licensing for using these assets outside of putting them in your video game. Like if you're going to do marketing where you've got imagery of the game or something you can monetize, there's issues with that. That's something I'll bring up in another video when we look at the new 2D RPG bundle that's come out from Humble Bundle. That's a completely different issue, but I'm not going to touch on that now. So let's just go back to one of the things that I found here while looking around as well. One of the things that I think you should watch out for as well is that the way that these asset store pages are actually marketed to you. Now, you can usually tell when something's had a little bit of work to it. This one in particular has had SEO work done on it, where they use keywords and phrases that make you think like, oh yeah, okay, well that seems pretty swish-o. That this has got some money behind it. This has got some production value. So you're more likely to want to purchase it because of these things. But you have to be careful, because a lot of the time these things can be a bit tricky. Or this one just didn't sit right with me, because it looked really great when I got it, but as I sort of read more after I got it, I felt that like maybe they'd gotten someone else to do the marketing for it, or they relied on some sort of marketing tactics to make it seem more viable, which is their right to do. I mean, they want to sell their product. You want to get good marketing for it, I understand. But let's just have a look at something that I noticed here as well. I think it was... Yeah, create any type of top-down game. Now they've got, everything is possible. Zelda, Hotline Miami, Final Fight, Streets of Rage, Alien Swarm, Helldivers, Nuclear Throne, GTA 1, Binding of Isaac, Enter the Gungeon, which is cut off here on the marketing thing. But just remember some of those names there for the items. There was another one here, packed with, that. This one here, designed with game feel and feedbacks at its core, right? So, and that actually says flickers. I don't know if that's coming up properly on YouTube. Maybe it's too small, that's all right. After this, especially with this, the first part here where they've got the most complete top-down solution for Unity. It is the best top-down action framework out there. Well, I mean, it's only just come out recently and it's only had 13 reviews. There are plenty of other top-down solutions out there. and frameworks for top-down solutions that have been around for a while. I did a search after this and found there was a lot more of them with a lot more positive reviews as well. They also seem just as whole. The other thing I'll say that this one has over the rest of them, that it does actually do 2D and 3D in the one system. It's a couple of different scripts, but that's a pretty good feature to have. It's better than most other systems that split it in either 2D or 3D. I would say that as far as 3D top-down controllers goes, Invector's got a much better one, and it handles everything from inventory, melee and shooting, enemy AI, all sorts of things as well, and like climbing around, doing all sorts of actual 3D movements, even in that top-down control style. So that's a way better top-down 3D framework than this one is, but it doesn't have 2D, so I can't really argue that there. What I can argue, though, is that I did find another engine, this one here, which has actually just come out in the past couple of days. Now, it's the Pixel top-down engine. It's got a demo and everything too. It works in pretty much a similar way, and it actually feels a lot smoother than the other one. That's not to say frame rate is poor. I think the performance of the top-down engine by More Mountains is actually really great. When I played it on, when I ran the demo scene, it ran perfectly well, and it ran smooth and felt nice. The controls were a little bit, I wouldn't say they're great game feel, but that you can tweak them and deal with that. Now, this one here, I played the demo on the website, and it played a lot better. It was a lot more responsive, very similar in layout and design. But as you can see here, things start to get a little bit strange here, and I've actually contacted the developer that's made this one and highlighted the issue to them. So please don't think that they're doing anything wrong. I've spoken to them. It's merely just a coincidence, basically based off the marketing techniques that people use. I actually think, seeing as this one's half the price of the other one, it's probably better. It does lack some of the features. I don't believe it's got an inventory, and I don't think it does melee either. But it does do most of the functions that the TDE by More Mountains has, but only half the price. So definitely check it out before you go and make a decision on what to buy. But you can see here, built with great game feel at its core to mimic some of the best games in the genre. And when you scroll down, where are we? Packed with features, built with player feedback and great game feel in mind. Our main focus while creating this engine was to try and mimic the game feel of the best games in the genre, such as Nuclear Throne, Enter the Gungeon, Hotline Miami, Soul Knight for Android, and many others. So let's just have a look at that top line there again. Packed with features, built with player feedback and great game feel in mind. Our main and let's just go back to this one here. Where are we? Where was it? Packed with features, built with player feedback and great game feel at its core. So slightly different wording, but pretty much the same spiel, which is why I think that this is more of a marketing technique. I actually thought at first that it might have been Unity was providing guidance on this stuff, and this might have been directly ripped from that, or they might have actually said that, like, here's some of the phrases you could throw in to help promote it, which could still be true. But again, as I spoke to the other asset dev, they seemed honest, and they were saying, look, yeah, we write it up ourselves. It's just coincidence, but we'll look into it and we'll see about changing it so that it doesn't look too suspect, right? And fair enough. But again, you can see that these sorts of techniques are what's used to get you to like an asset more than what's actually there. I like a more functional spiel about it. I've had several ones. One of the asset packs that I really do like is Physics Toolkit. Let's just have a look at that. Simple Physics Toolkit by Dylan Auty, I believe is what it's called. Simple physics manipulation scripts. Simply drag the scripts onto a game object. New in November 2017, we've just added a new realism mode for the magnet script, which attempts to obey Newton's second law. Cool. Additionally to this, we've added a single propulsion system. So this is very functional. This says, hey, this is what's actually in it. Now, these other two assets do have the functional stuff. They go down here and start saying it, but it's got this marketing spiel up here. And I just don't trust the marketing spiel. I think personally it's a bad way to go, because it's just a tool used at trying to trick you. It's not telling you anything super informative about the asset itself. It's just playing around with words to make something seem more desirable than it might actually be. Whereas this one here just goes straight into it. simply drag the scripts onto a game object with a collider component attached and watch it do the rest. And that's true of the actual thing as well. If I've used it in the tutorial series, you'll see that it is pretty much simple as just tagging objects. If not, you will see it when I start putting in some of the cool stuff. So going back to this one here, so yeah, so you can already see that there's some issues that I have with the way it's marketed. Again, I didn't really notice this until after I purchased it and started having the bad experiences with it. I looked a bit deeper and then started getting this. So whether it's because I was in a bad mood or I was just had a sour taste from the asset that made me look into this more, fair enough, there is a slight bit of that. I did actually ask a few other people that were asset devs themselves and said, hey, can you have a look at this and have a look at the forum posts that are there and tell me whether you think I was acting silly or whether you think I did have some cause for concern with the way the responses that I was getting. So, and I was reassured that, in the majority of it was that, yes, that they did come off the way that I felt that they were coming off. I didn't get any feedback on me, but whether that's just because I know the asset devs that were talking to me, I don't know whether they held back there. And fair enough, if you think of that as well, if you think that I had a bad attitude, by all means comment on it. I'm happy to take that feedback and have a look at it. I think that I may have said some things on there that were sort of very much an aggressive way of dealing with the subject, and I will take that on board as that that's probably not the best way to handle it, but we'll go through that shortly anyway and have a look. So going down to the reviews, so I can show only the three most helpful reviews, which are all 5-star ones, doing this thing now. I give 5-star ones quite often. A lot of the time it's more likely to be on models and media, so art assets rather than systems. To give it onto art assets because they're an enclosed package. You get what you get. If there's a problem with it, it's usually something minor that doesn't really deserve minusing a star. But a 5-star rating is like a perfect asset basically, and you only give that when something is perfect, but an art asset is so enclosed as opposed to a system or a functional asset that is open-ended and has to be interpreted in different ways. So it's a different set of criteria basically to give that star rating. So I give a 5-star to an art asset because it doesn't need to be fixed. There's no more building on top of something unless there is, there was a couple of joints weren't set properly, but again that's just they can issue an update where they fix that. It's not like as though they need to extend and give more in that asset pack, unless you think that they do, and then you would give it a lesser rating because you go, I paid $50 for this pack but I only got 3 soldiers when it looked like I was going to get 20. You did something like that, but again it's very different criteria that you would mark art media versus systems and toolkits. So going on, so this is a toolkit, so there's people who have written stuff now. It's hard to give critique on other people's reviews. The way I see the Unity asset reviews is that it's actually the most powerful tool that we as asset store consumers have to speak out or speak to assets basically and let others know that this is the bargaining power that we have. So I don't like to put anyone else down for their review. You do have to be careful because, with all social media platforms, there is the instances where certain items, especially even just any kind of e-commerce, you can have falsified reviews or reviews that are just sort of straight off the bat of getting the product and the person's happy, so they just give a 5-star review and they pass it on. They're not good reviews, basically. I mean, they'll be great reviews because they're 5-star, but they're not informative, and you have the ability to say whether it's helpful, yes or no. I don't use that as much as I normally would. If I do read through a thing, I'll go yeah, that was a good enough review. I'll either give it a tick to say yes, it was helpful because it answered a question I have, or it made me think about something else with the asset, or I'll go no because I've done that once or twice where I can see it's really a shady review, or one that I think that has been created by either a friend of the dev or like a marketing campaign where the people go to the extent of actually paying for marketing campaigns and comments on their asset page. And one thing that Unity does also to actually support this the delineation between these things is it actually says what version of the asset they were talking about. So it could be they were commenting on an old version and their issues have been addressed in a new one. Or it could be that they've actually received the asset for free, so then it's a different thing. I'm just going to take a drink because I'm starting to get hot. So you can make up your mind from those reviews, and I suggest that you do use the user reviews when you can, to get an idea about the asset beyond the marketing spiel that someone has given to you, or the developer has presented and any of the marketing material, because they are good sources for the most part. You can see here these are the three best ones, but let's go to my one, or just show all of them. Mine was from a day ago, so it's the first one on there. In some sense, I do feel a little bit guilty that it is at the top of the list. I think that there will eventually be more that will push it down anyway. But I felt like I had to make this because I just felt, not egregious. Whatever. I felt like I had to post it. Again, so I'm just going to read it out for you. You can probably read this yourself even better than I can. But pretty disappointed with the asset pack as it was not living up to the impression I had from the marketing material. In its defence, I will say that it does in fact include a series of integrated systems that will allow you to create a top-down 2D game. And it does. It has all these systems that you can use. You just have to know how to use them because there's no real prompt for how to do it. My main concerns are that this engine is not as easy as described for new Unity users. As I was explaining before, it basically... It says that, hey, if you're new to Unity or if you're not new to Unity, you will get benefit out of this because it's built for you. Whereas not really built for new Unity users because you have to go and actually learn a whole bunch more of Unity to become, an intermediate Unity user. The documentation only guides you to set up an instance of an action, but does not explain how that needs to fit in with other elements. And half of the documentation directs you to explore Unity's larger documentation files, rather than guide you on how to best utilise the engine. As I mentioned earlier, that's what I got from the documentation, and I'll go through that after I finish this paragraph, just to showcase what I mean with that one there. I do just put here as well, on the one hand, I can see why the dev wouldn't want to waste time reteaching skills that can be learned elsewhere, because that's perfectly fine. The devs have put out a product, they've got to do a lot of support stuff, they don't really have the time to really push out and hold people's hand through things. But I don't think that it's fair to actually advertise that the documentation is actually complete and comprehensive when it actually directs you to go to another set of documentation that's not written by them to learn a whole new system in order to use that system in this thing. All you really need to do, as I mentioned earlier, is just put down what people need to know of that system to utilise yours. Now, you don't have to teach them the system. You can actually just sort of relay to it and go, set up this camera here, and then in the settings put this in, because it really is just actually that simple. The settings are like that. You can just drop parts in, or you can steal a camera from another scene and drop that in. That should be fine. But when it comes to dealing with the camera, it's like, no, go learn Cinemachine and then come back to me. Like, no, you were supposed to have an easy to use top-down 2D engine, but you didn't. So I'm just going to go back up. Let's actually open up the documentation. I can show you what I mean by that. We'll just pop back down here. So, introduction to the top-down engine. So it says, what it is, and again, it's more just a thing. This part here is fair on them. They get errors after installing the package. I saw that some people had this issue, and it has been explained for a bit by the developer, and I think they were fairly transparent with it and what's going on, and it's not their fault. It's basically because you need to bring in those extra systems, they can't have it as part of their package because they're not allowed to bundle it. But they do have an automated process for bringing it into your project. So it's always best practice if you actually install this engine onto a clean and fresh project. So don't put it over the top of another project you have, because it's going to fiddle with all the settings and you can get some issues. They explain it there. And then it's got where to start. Well, first off, you don't have to read all that documentation. Well, I don't have to read any of it because none of it's working. The engine is built with Unity good practices in mind. Okay. And is packed with help boxes. Well, not really. No, it's got commenting on it, but there's no actual tooltip boxes that I've found. So if this is not your first Unity project, you'll probably be okay on your own, and you can always go back to something that's not clear. That said, you can use the menu on the left to get specific places. The documentation is functional. Yeah, I mean, it teaches you how to do certain things, but it doesn't tell you how to put it all together. If you have any questions about the code itself, you rather want to have a look at the API documentation. Not really. It's also recommended to look at the code's comments directly. Usually they cover pretty much any question you might have. Well, no, they didn't, because I was trying to find the part that would cover the question that I had, and I didn't get help from anywhere. Yeah, actually, no, that's not true. There was several other users on the forum that were actually a lot more helpful than the dev, not the asset dev themselves, and I do appreciate the effort that they put in, and their stuff was good information. If you want a list of features or wondering what's included, you can look at this page. Yep, so that just takes it to the feature page. There's also video tutorials on YouTube. Again, no, there isn't, other than setting it up at the start, which would cover this that you've already got written in here. If that doesn't help, you can always use the support email link on the assets page. So this is actually something I'll cover in a minute anyway, because it does come up. So we go over, we got contents of the asset, minimal scene requirements. I thought this one would be okay. I tried actually putting these assets in like it had asked, but things weren't working properly. It didn't work right. I tried setting the settings the same as it was. In the end, it was actually easier just to get one of the scenes that was already set up and try and replace some of the character stuff or the assets in that to get a different character controller going. And even that was difficult. Frequently asked questions. So downloaded the asset, it's not working. So again, these are the ones that are coming through with the error. Is there a tutorial? Well, you're reading the documentation right now, so it's a good start. Yeah, all right, settle down, mate. There's also video tutorials over on YouTube. I'm just going to click this link in case it takes me to somewhere else. No, it doesn't. It's still the same place. Unless he's planning on putting them up much further, but then you shouldn't in the documentation say here's the tutorials when there are no tutorials. So you should say tutorials will be coming soon on this YouTube page. Easy enough fix, and then I can't complain about it. How can I add my mobile controls from that? Yeah, I don't like pressing A to jump. Yeah, cool. So they're defined in the input manager. You can do that. Easy. They don't really have to explain. I don't expect them to explain the input manager. No worries. You can use the code in anything you want. And then can't I just compile the asset and upload it without changing anything to Google Play, Steam, Greenlight, or the Apple Store? No. All this sounds like a genius master plan. I'm afraid it's not legal. Be imaginative. Create your own game. Of course, you can use the asset of a basis. That's what it's for. But I mean, you did say that we can use all of the assets inside it and the code to create a game. So we could actually just build the game and change some of the Google Play, Steam, Greenlight, or Apple Store details in it, and change the music or whatever, and then, like your website says, we're allowed to use that for our game, and that's fine. So, all right, cool. A little bit contradictory, but that's nothing to shake our head over. Is there any way I could help? Well, you could put a nice review on the asset store. This takes me to another issue that I'm going to bring up soon. Who is this? I'm a French designer. I also do illustration, and I'm available for freelance work. Yeah, okay, good on you. Got another question. If they're not answered above, then join the discussion on the Unity forum thread. Okay, so it's actually actively asking you to join the Unity thread to make a discussion or ask questions. Or send me a message using the support email on the assets page, or you can use the form on this page. It's up to you. Yay. Agents, how to create your character. Introduction, basic concept. So normally what happens is if you've actually got a character and that, you can usually just replace parts of it that you need, and that will work. And in this case, it does sort of work, but as soon as you wanted to start making changes to it or changing things up from the way that character in the demo is set up, you start hitting a lot of problems. So this thing here, this isn't too bad. It tells you exactly what you need on it. I put those things on it, but some of the when you use the automated system, some of the features that are supposed to be on it don't line up quite too well. I've done it the exact same way that it's written up there, and things just don't turn out the way it's supposed to be. The automatic creation stuff here. To be fair, I've only gone over it once and tried it, and it didn't work. I haven't actually looked into it again to see if I missed anything on this page and specifically, but it was more dealing with the animator that I had direct issues with, and that's what led me to my questions. Components approach, I think it just says, this is that there. So you think that, doing this, you would have everything up and running. And if you do just use the stock standard models that are in there, then yes, you will have it up and running. Character abilities, this goes into talk about the standard abilities that are built in. Ability overview tries to explain a bit about how the scripts are set up and how they're going to work so that you can go and make your own. The state machine, character components responsible for triggering the various abilities. It does so using state machines. So So state machine's a design pattern will basically store current state, previous one. Yep. So this is a little bit here about the animator and the way it controls it, which is great. But the only real thing that you can take away from this is talking about how it does the initialization of the character abilities. So if you need to add more, you do actually need to put in the right code in it to make it register that that's an ability and to send that to the animated controller. And it tells you a bit about here about how to create it. Just basically shows you the basic structure of it, which I believe is also available in the asset itself, how to put it together. So that's good. But animations, this is where I struggled with. This is where I had a lot of trouble. When you have a look at the way this is set up, it's pretty straightforward. You think that, yep, that would be fine, and that's how the 2D animation controller is. As soon as I started changing things about, it wasn't working. Now, there's ways of solving it, and I did actually go through and figure out how to solve it. But my main issue was that I brought up some rather normal questions, but received the boot from the asset dev. I was told to go learn the Unity animation system. Now, if you've seen my tutorials with Invector, you can see how complex animation controllers become, and I know how to use that controller, so I do know how to use the animation system. What I was trying to ask is, how is this engine actually affecting the animation system? And I couldn't find that in the documentation. Even on that section we were on just before, doesn't quite explain it. A user on the forums actually explained it a lot better than anyone else has, including the documentation, but whatever. So it says here, this is how you can set up the controller. Animations and scripts, how to do that. Adding new animations. To add a new animation, do this. I think it was actually not that page. It's the advanced AI. I haven't gone through that. Weapons. This was where it was. So creating a weapon. So I wanted to make a sword just straight off the bat. This was the first page that I went to in order to figure out how to make a melee weapon based on the 2D controller that I had. Now, the difference that I had was that the one that's in the demo scene is actually the character itself has no arms, and all of the animation is done in the weapon itself, not the character. Now, I needed to go the other way, where I needed the character to actually play an attack animation with a sword in its hand and have nothing... nothing on the weapon model itself. And I thought that I'd be able to do that quite easily because of the way that this explains how to do the animations. It actually shows you exactly how to do that, but it didn't work. And when I asked questions about, hang on, why is this documentation telling me something that's not working? And then they're like, well, actually it is working, you just don't understand it. It's not the engine's fault. Go look at Unity's documentation to learn more. That's not helpful. All right, just putting it out there, that is not a helpful response, telling people to go elsewhere because it's their fault. I actually did say when I first put it down, I go, I'm sure I'm just doing something wrong, but can you point me in the right direction for what I'm doing wrong? And eventually they did. They told me it was a transition issue. Didn't tell me how to fix that transition issue, just told me that I had to make a whole new animator for it, and that it wasn't going to work with their own animator, despite the fact that this tutorial shows their own animator and puts it in there. So let's go through this. So step by step, create an empty game object. Done. Add a melee weapon component to it, so that's this script here. Now, one of the things I found is that animation parameter names actually has an extra section on top of this in the current build, which isn't shown here. I don't think it was super. It doesn't cause too much of an effect, although it might. But it is an extra parameter that you can use when designing your animated controller. But it's not in this, so you shouldn't need it in order to build the melee weapon. So this is the object with the component on it. So in the inspector, set the following parameters: trigger mode, semi-auto, damage area shape to rectangle, area size 1:1, area offset 2:0. This is for a 2D weapon, by the way. I mean, it should have been fairly obvious, but it doesn't specifically say, at least I don't believe it does. No, so it doesn't tell you that it's 2D or 3D, but obviously in the 3D one, you're going to need the Z axis as well. So the damage area will activate in front of our character because that's where you've got to put the offset on. Active duration to 2 because it's a short attack, it's a punch, and then set the damage caused target layer. So active duration, which is where are we? Where even is the active duration? Does it pop up on there? Can't even find it on there. I'll have to actually have a look at the script as well to find where that's listed. And the damage caused to 10. I think that's actually, yeah, that might be a bit further down the script. Anyway, rename the game object to melee attack weapon or whatever you prefer. Drag the game object into your hierarchy to make a prefab out of it. Select your character and drag that newly created prefab into its initial weapon slot, or you can use the change weapon method via a script to equip it. So if you're using the one that's in the demo, it's already got these scripts on there. If you're making your own one, you have to put this script on there as well. It doesn't come in the auto make character one, because you can choose to handle weapons, or you can choose to have an inventory and whatnot. So that's all right. That's not a problem. It is listed that you will need to put it on there. So cool. That's it. Now you've got a working weapon. So you press the play button, you press E, you'll be throwing punches, but of course you won't be doing any animation because there's no animation tied to it. So you just be standing there, and there'll be like a blank, nothing happening. So you won't be able to tell, but if you're next to something that can be damaged, then it should damage it, right? It should. I haven't got it working like that, but that's fine. So that's it. So now we've got the weapon. You can do that, but let's make an animation for it. Select your character's animator, drag your attack animation onto it if it's not already the case. So you can drop the animation onto your animated controller anywhere that you need, and then you make a new ball, which is melee attack start. And that's what we've got in our parameters, I believe. They've put it in there already, or are we doing that next? No? All right. Create a new animation parameter. Yep, so melee attack start or melee. Create a transition to that animation. So you just need to transition it and then put melee attack start true. So it's true that's on there. That's all you need, right? That's all it says that you need anyway. Go back to your weapons inspector and fill the start animation field. So this is where we put in melee attack start in the start animation parameter. All right, so that should be it. Press play again, attack with your weapon. You now see your character attacking. You can add other animations for when the attack is in progress, ending, etc. So it doesn't actually tell you how to do those, but it's fairly straightforward. It's the same process. You would just transition from the start to the end or whatever, or you can put it in here and it will play those parameters the same way. It doesn't work. This does not work. If you actually get the 2D controller that's already there and you put this in and you do exactly what's written up here, you will not see your character trigger off that animation, or you will not see the character play through the animation that's attacking. It won't work. So what's going on there is the 2D controller is built with such a way that it will trigger off for like the split second, but in the same update calls that are coming through, it's set to walking or idle, and it overrides that one there. So it stops playing that animation and goes back in like a fraction of a second, so you don't get to see your attack happen. When I brought this up, I said, hey, what's going on? I fill it out the way the documentation says. I think I'm just doing something wrong. What's the issue? Like, okay, well, actually, you know what? Let's go to see what I say on it, because it is, it's interesting the way they deal with it. Forum. I might not actually be able to show you the replies because I've actually ignored the thing. I just didn't want to have a bar of it. So so I just asked some basic questions here, which were pretty much set up. So that one's fine. In addition to the question above, the animation flipping, does the system use Unity's Mechanim controller? Yeah, this was before I bought it. I just wanted to know how the animations are handled, whether it's similar to some of the other products I use, and sure enough, it was. Cool. So I picked it up and just realised after filling that, characters are animated with arms. So this one here, I'm just talking about, how do I set up the animations in a sense of like I can see that the character doesn't have arms, but if I have arms on a character, am I able to do some sort of IK system built into the engine itself, or do I need to make an extra script outside of it? And the answer was that yes, I would need to make an extra script outside of it, which is understandable. The system was built with a specific type of animation style in mind, but it is flexible enough that you can build on top of that. So that's fine. And this guy here has actually just replied with, he's added the arms to the weapon sprite, so you can run it the same way as it does now, and the same way as that pixel top-down one does it as well. Thanks guys, but no worries, I'll do that. Had another chat later on. Someone else asked a question about the timescale, and I'm sure I saw it, so I put in a response there to try and help them, but I probably come up a bit short in my response, and I do apologise for that. Sorry mate, I didn't have the project open yet, so just talking about that. Now we come down here to where I've actually made the post. This is when I was doing a lot of troubleshooting, trying to figure it out. So I've put in, having a bit of difficulty getting a new controller up and animating properly. Have tried to create one fresh following the documentation, and also tried modifying one from the existing scenes. First issue was the root motion anim set I was using, but even using the base animations with a template, I was getting issues where the model would end up outside of the controller collider, usually after jumping. But my biggest issue that I can't seem to fix is putting in extra animations, such as the melee attack. I've tried it via the documentation and tried it about 6 different variations, but the animation either doesn't play, plays a fraction of a second, or throws my character model way off track. Not sure what I'm doing so wrong. I will make a video showing how to put it together. If someone's able to point out what I'm doing wrong, it'll be handy. I'm getting this issue on both 2D and 3D controllers, so I'm pretty sure it's a step I'm missing somewhere. So that's me putting down that, like, hey, I've tried this, it's not working out. Now the root motion stuff, it was the models I had root motion curves built into the actual root of the character, and it means that I can't modify them on the character itself. I can't do the bacon position, that sort of thing. So the way of getting around that, which was something that I actually did miss because I was so busy looking elsewhere for the animation stuff and making my own versions of the animation, trying to get rid of the root motion. So this guy Necker has said, yeah, in place you can actually tick that checkbox on the animated controller script that says use root motion. You can turn that off, and that did actually fix my root motion problems, which was fantastic. But anyway, moving on from that, so the other issue that I had was like that, and I've said, I know the checkbox you're talking about, and I know I didn't play around with it, so I'll see how that affects it. It's a Cobalt action pack, yeah, blah, blah, blah. I looked up the way to modify the animals and got that worked out, so that was cool. So I fixed the root motion problem. But my issue feels more like the controller isn't properly triggering the animation when attacking. I'm fairly certain I just haven't set it up properly with a weapon handling script and melee weapon. Cheers for the help. So I said, like, yeah, look, this is what I think is going wrong. And you know, thank you for the help. But like, I think, yeah, the main issue I'm having is this one with a weapon handling script where I've just missed an option somewhere. So I put together a video to better explain it. Again, this is me like trying to be like, hey, look, I'm sure I'm doing something wrong. Can you look over it and help me, right? So, okay. So because I've got him muted, you can't see the reply. So that's going to make it difficult. You can see it when you log in, but I can't do it on my one unless I log out, maybe. Let's see if I can actually log out of this. Log out. See if that helps. Yep, cool. So now we should be able to see it because it's there. There we go. So there he is. Again, please don't be negative towards the developer of this. That's not what I'm after. That's not what the goal is of this this video. I do just want to highlight that I think the way they handle the situation, or the way they handle customer service, is not satisfactory compared to a lot of other people. But that's just it is the way it is. And this is turning into a really long video. So if anyone's actually still watching it, thanks. Where are we? Yeah, a similar problem with the thing. Yeah, hey, thanks for that. Yeah, dedicated script. So we come down here to just after my video. So I've replied to Necker, then he's replied, it's hard to tell what you're doing wrong without any info, but if the animation either doesn't play, plays a fraction, it looks like you need to learn how to set up transitions properly. All the engine does is send an update to animation parameters. Well, good, he's actually answered what the engine does there. The rest is just regular Unity animator, absolutely nothing specific. I'd start with Unity's documentation about it to get started. If I wasn't playing at all, I'd say that you didn't bind the animator properly or forgot to name the animator parameters on your weapon, but you said it wasn't the case, so it's probably just a transition issue. Okay, cool. Only slightly condescending, but I looked over it because I thought, no, that's maybe just the way he talks, and it wasn't super offensive. He did try and tell me, go learn it yourself. He doesn't know what my level of skill is with the Unity animator, so that's fine, I can pass that, right? But he says it's probably just a transition issue. Now I can take a bit of a gripe with that because, again, I did it the way the documentation is laid out. The documentation is supposed to be complete. So the documentation didn't tell me anything about setting up that transition. It just said set up the transition and then show me a picture. So I did it like the picture and it didn't work. So I put, again, I think I actually posted this before I read that he had the thing. No, it was the next day. So I go, here's a video that I've seen, yeah. Plenty of, I've used the animator. Okay, so yeah, this is where I actually directly address what he said. I've said I've used the controller plenty of times with other assets, but I follow the documentation on the website to implement the features, but not getting the results. The only thing I've noticed with the documentation is the weapon animator field that wasn't there. That doesn't exist on the documentation page. I assume it's from a newer version. Didn't think that would have any issue to it. But again, I'm just sort of saying, yeah, look, I know how to use the animator in a polite way. I'm not saying like, yeah, mate, I know how to do it. With other assets, but I followed the documentation. What I was trying to point out is that I've done what the document says to do, but it's not working the way that it says it should work. So what gives? Okay, video is unlisted, so what I've done here is that it's unlisted, so it won't appear in searches, but if I can solve the issue, I'll put together a mini setup video so others can see how to put a character together, right? What I'm doing there is I'm going, look, I'm not publishing this as in like, oh, this asset's broken. I mean, I'm doing that now with this negative review, but like I said, I don't like doing these sorts of things, so I would rather actually put, hey guys, here's how to, if you're like, like me and you don't know how to do this, here's how to put it together. Here's a little tutorial on how to do it. That's what I want to do. And I said I would offer to do that, obviously free, because that's just what I do. That's part of the hobby that I take part in. He goes, in your video, it's clearly visible the engine does its job and updates the parameter at 0.52. And like, yeah, sure, it's triggering off. But again, it's not. And he goes, now, as I said, you may want to work on your transitions a little. Now, the wording of that, again, is a little condescending, but I think it might just be the way he talks. Maybe he is French, so maybe English is his second language, and the way he speaks in English, he might not understand some of the tone that it comes off as. Perfectly all right. I don't expect him to do that. But the more as we go on, I just start going, no, this is a little bit, inappropriate. As the video clearly shows, your animator is going to the walking state as it should if you haven't changed anything from the default controller. Well, I haven't changed anything from the default controller because your documentation didn't say I needed to change the controller. It just said, here's how to put it in. So again, it's just about setting up a proper animator setup with proper transition conditions. The any state pattern might work fine for me in my demo, but if you want to make changes to it, I'd recommend sticking to a more traditional setup, especially if you're not super familiar with the system. Again, before I posted the video, I've used the animator controller plenty of times with other assets. Okay, cool. So this is starting to go a little bit strange. Again, absolutely nothing specific to the engine here. Okay, so it's not the engine's fault that the documentation doesn't work properly or the engine's not set up with the user-friendly ability that was claimed in the marketing material. So my response, okay, a little bit, I'll admit, probably a little bit of attitude with this can certainly be construed, and there probably was a bit of attitude. I was in a bad mood when I wrote it because I'm like, you've just ignored what I've said and you've tried to push me off elsewhere saying it's not your fault, not your problem. I don't think that's a great thing. So I've just put, okay, but you also see that the transition is the same as the dash, which works fine and plays the full animation, but the attack does not. Is there something in the weapon script? Now that part's actually key in this argument. Is there something in the weapon script I need to look at in order to change it so it plays the full animation? Also, I follow the documentation that you've put up on how to add an attack animation to the controller, and this is the result I'm getting. And then I put specifically this page, and I went to that weapons page where it said, this is how you set up an attack animation, and this is what will happen with your controller. But it didn't. So, we go on to the next page. There's no silver bullet when it comes to animation, and no generic answer. Okay, but there's certainly an answer relating to the way your engine does stuff. I strongly believe that each animator should be different and tailored for your character. It's all explained here. Well, it's not. I've looked at your documentation and you've taken me to the animations page where it says, like, yeah, you should set up a controller in a way, but it doesn't tell me how to utilize what you already said in the other page. The engine's documentation only covers the specifics of the engine. It's meant to teach you how to use it. It's not meant to teach you. It isn't, sorry. Meant to teach you how to use Unity's animator, as Unity already has excellent tutorials about it. I assure you the engine is working as intended, and your video proves it. There's absolutely nothing to change in any script. You just have to fine-tune your animator. Again, there's nothing to change in any script. You just have to fine-tune your animator. As I said, your transitions aren't set properly. For example, I'm going to assume you haven't changed the walking state's transition condition, so it's going to transition to that if you don't prevent it. Again, if you're not comfortable with any state pattern, which is really only good for demos, stick to something more traditional. Very condescending, the way that that's written out. Again, he's like, oh, go and learn like Unity tutorials. Mate, I know how to use Unity. I get it. What I'm saying is that your scripts are firing off in a certain way, and I don't understand why, because I've looked at the script and it doesn't say why it's different to the other script. Someone else actually answers that down further, and that was very helpful. But yeah, nothing to change in any script, just have to fine-tune your animator. But again, I'm doing what your documentation has told me to do. Quite clearly, it says this is specifically what you need to do at each step, and it will work at this, but it was not getting me that. So I said, okay, rather condescending response. All right, attitude, fair enough. You are correct that it wants to go back to the walk animation straight away, so I guess the prevent movement option doesn't work, because there is an option to prevent movement when conducting the attack, and I had that ticked and I had that set so that it would stop your movement, but my character was still moving and going back to the walk animation as though it was just completely ignoring that fact. I also guess that the full of attitude here. I also guess that the documentation provided is incorrect. I'll sort out my own solution. Thanks. Yep. Full attitude. Not going to deny it. That was an attitude response, because by that stage I was like, no, mate, you're telling me that I don't know how to do Unity, and then you're just telling me to go somewhere else because you can't be bothered dealing with it. I'm not sure what's condescending about it. I pointed you at the solution. Yeah, the solution is go somewhere else and get a solution. You just want different transitions. From what I can tell from your video, the current ones are transitioning to walking, or I suppose idle if you're idle. If you want the weapon animation to play, you need to change these transitions. Well, why isn't that in your documentation? It's as simple as that, and I don't know of any other solution. Please let me know what's incorrect in the provided documentation. I'll be happy to update it, but I just checked. It seems to cover all you need to know as far as the engine's concerned. And please don't hesitate to use support email if you have issues with this. Why would I use a support email since you've already told me it's not an issue with your engine, so go somewhere else? It just doesn't. Oh, and the prevent movement option has nothing to do with animation. It just prevents movement, but it's not preventing the movement. My character is still moving and still setting the walk trigger. The character won't move while attacking, and that works as intended. Animation is a different thing, so it's still going to play the walk animation and move the character, but you're telling me that that's a different thing and it's working as intended. If you watch my video, you can see I'm still moving. So again, that's why I say, so why does it still move and trigger the walking state if the prevent movement option is selected? Documentation I link gives explicit instruction on how to add the animation, but the following it doesn't work as the bull gets triggered and instantly overridden by other triggers. Fiddled with the transition settings and nothing prevented them from overriding the melee attacks, so instead I created a new layer. So again, I just built a new animated controller and got it basically working. But again, that's not how the documentation said that, and this is what my gripe was. The documentation says one thing, but you are telling us to do another to get it working, and it's not right. I'm not sure why you're reacting like this. I'm just trying to help. No, you're being extremely condescending, and it's not helpful. It's bad customer service, and I can show some good customer service and the way people respond to certain things as much better options. I'm also not sure what else to add here. The engine works as intended. It updates the boolean, and that's actually all it does. It's normal that walking remains true. Well, not if I'm not moving. If it says prevent movement, why is walking still true? You may want your character to be able to move and shoot, and you're technically still in the walking state. You're not idle. So now what you're saying is that there is something in the script that basically doesn't overwrite that walking state, and allows me to keep walking, except for when I have the prevent movement selected, which should prevent me from walking again, but that doesn't work. So there's certainly more to it than it is. And yes, the documentation explains what's specific to the engine when adding an animation, but doesn't indeed explain how to set it up, as that depends on your character. It's standard, really, and I can't know how you want it set up. If you have more questions about this, again, please use the support email. I want it set up in a way where you can actually play the animation and have it work. That's regardless of what else you get, but basically what you're saying is that the documentation's complete in the fact that if I did exactly that but nothing else in the anime controller, it would work. But as soon as I put something else in there, your documentation is now defunct. It doesn't work, and I have to figure out my own way of setting up the transitions. That's silly. Like, your documentation is useless to me then. So this guy, Neca, again, good guy, said, quickly made some tests, and it's not to be taken as reference, but for a specific, just testing for the animation. And he's made a thing here. He hasn't really explained how to do it, but I've already dealt with fiddling with the transitions and setting up some of the other condition settings and stuff like that. And again, it's still giving certain issues where it doesn't work. You just have to completely rebuild the animated controller, and you have to know how to do that yourself rather than have the engine have a wizard or a way of doing it that you can just modify it and get it to work. Silly. Again, thanks for the extra explanation. So he's just commenting on that guy's thing. That's great. And then he goes on to talking with someone else, and I've left it at this point. I've just said I'm just going to ignore it because I don't want any more of it. I've ignored him, so I don't see any follow-up posts that he do to it. But Boom Shaka here is another one that's given a really good answer. He's quoted my post and then said, that's your problem right there. The triggers, the engine is firing too many at the same time. You need to tell it not to. So he's basically gone and answered the question that I originally asked of what's actually going on with the engine. Like, why is it telling me? Why is it triggering the walk animation when it should be triggering the attack animation and nothing else? But he just said that's exactly it. The scripts are firing it. He said he had the same issues when the animations first started, and he reckons mapping out the animations and rebuilding an animated controller, and making sure that the transitions are finite. If there's any overlap, then they're not going to work properly. And he said, don't use the example animators for anything other than a very basic mob. They're not practical for player character with complex transitions. And he says, no offense for Unis, because basically the animated controllers don't work if you're going to use them for anything other than what's in the demo, which, the asset dev has actually said himself. But the problem is that if you're putting this out as a template, then it's bad. It's bad because it's not user friendly. People will use it and go, why isn't this working? I'm having trouble, and it's just going to give them a bad experience. Sorry, one more thing. A lot of the built-in parameters like walking, dashing are based on the engine's finite state machine. You're either walking or you're dashing, but never both at the same time. So this is, again, what he's talking about is that the scripts are actually overriding that bool and saying that, yes, you're not doing anything, you are doing this. But the melee weapon, custom weapon parameters are independent of the finite state machine, which is what he explains here. This whole write-up is the answer that I was looking for. This is 100% what I was asking the question about, but instead I got told to go learn a Unity animation system. I got told that the engine's working perfectly and I just don't understand it. And it's like, well, I don't understand it because your documentation isn't explaining it properly to me. So the animator will run as many animations as it can find where one of those condition statements is true. So you have to build transitions where only one condition can be true at a time. And I did do that, and I got it working eventually, but it was a lot of hassle for not a lot of payoff, and then I have to redo it when I'm building a new controller anyway. You also need to look at the engine logically. For example, if you're preventing movement while firing, then you're setting a multiplier on the character's movement speed of 0. That means your character may still be walking or running, they're just not moving. So this is what he's talking about, and this is the answer as to why, even though I put the stop movement, it was still walking, because it was still taking the input of walking and assuming that that's what it is. So that just means that the character ability for the walking or the movement is flawed, and I'd have to go into the script and figure out what's going on, or figure out a way of setting up the transitions to get it to not do that, but that's not explained in the documents. There are built-in parameters to track speed across all axes, giving you several options on building out your transitions. So yeah, that's eventually what I did, is I looked at doing the speeds and the transition, the speeds on the transition to say that yes, if you are doing this, then you are walking and you're doing this. You're absolutely right, and that's what I've been saying all along, except, wow, I'm glad I had that ignored, because if I'd seen that, I would have just said fuck off. And I apologise for the language, it's the first time I've sworn in this, but that's not what you've been saying all along. You've been telling me, yeah, your transitions are wrong, go learn about transitions. You haven't been saying, oh, look, what's happening is that these are firing off here, so in order to do that, I will change the documentation and say you need to set this out in a certain way. You didn't do that, whatever. So I've answered with boom, because I wanted to be polite to him. I want to say that, yeah, look, all right, thank you for the thing. I've actually hit like on it, I believe, and say thank you for explaining it the best way you can. And said pretty much the answer I was after. Tried looking at the script to see whether the melee weapon was triggering animations different to the thing, but was coming up short. The concern is the documentation doesn't really highlight this and just seems to indicate that you can use the provided animators without modification, which is confusing for new people as parts won't work. Built a few other animated controllers that are working, but they're certainly not out of the box or noob friendly. Engine is good as it delivers a bunch of integrated parts, but it's neither the best solution. This is where I go like, yeah, get wrecked. The best solution, nor the most gameplay friendly out there that I have used. Only real benefit is that it does both 2D and 3D natively. I'm putting together a review video that will highlight some of these things and hopefully provide better info for newcomers. So here's a review video. Yay! It's been like probably an hour almost now, an hour and 16 minutes. There you go, and you finally gotten to the point that I was trying to get, which is, hey, it's difficult to make. Cool. He's got a reply. I'm not going to read it on here. I had him blocked for a reason, because I don't want to keep continuing on with this thing. I did want to make this video as just my point, but I don't want to get locked into a back and forth argument with him. Again, I want you to make up your own mind when you look at this and see the reaction. If I can use another example for reactions. So this one here, this is the forum thread for the RPG pack, which I'm using in the Invector tutorial template. I think that the way a lot of the interactions between the developer and the customers or the consumers that are using the pack have been good. There might be one or two that some of the customers might be unhappy with. I think that it's mostly fine, but when you look at something, you can automatically set trends that will increase certain attributes. For example, stamina cost can be reduced when you level up, melee damage can be increased, etc., but there's no UI for level up skill selection. So that's a response into a question. That seems to work fine. That answers it fine. No attitude or anything like that. Not, by the way, go learn another system. Yeah, come on. The developer also has actual tutorial videos on how to set it up. I'm working on tutorial videos that spell it out for you on how to do it. So if you're new, you can get it done that way. So I mean, was there anything else I really wanted to touch on with that? So yeah, so you can see the difference that I find with the way you can handle something. You can definitely see it in the way this guy Boom Shaka answers it. He answers my question perfectly. Now, there's two ways to look at this. I can see that from a developer's point of view, I get that like it can be hard sometimes to answer questions, especially when they've been asked like 100 times before. I actually looked back through, and there were several other instances of people asking the exact same thing that I did, where they go, I tried doing this, but it's not working. I don't understand it. And he's given pretty much the same answer. And there's been some other questions that are similar, and he's also given the same answer of go look at this, go look at that instead. Stop. It's sort of fobbing it off. It's the way I feel is that it's fobbing it off. So I go general. So we have a look here. We've got things for cameras. Introduction, like anything. Regular UI cameras, yep. Default Cinemachine. The engine relies on Cinemachine. Learn about it here. Pixel Perfect. Check out this documentation. So again, this is showing that... the only specifics to the top-down engine, these components added to the virtual camera. So the cinematic confiner automatically set the level meshes bound on start, so you don't have to worry about it. Okay, but how do I use it? What do I do with that? What's that going to do? Used to catch camera shake events and move the virtual camera around in a shake pattern. Okay, how do I set that up? What do I do to get what I want out of it? Show me an example of how that works, other than like, I'll have a look at the scene. Because the demo scene's not, annotated as like, oh, here's what to do. It does have some inbuilt things, but I don't think it explains the camera shake or what to do in the inspector windows, things like that. That's what you expect to see from documentation that's complete and comprehensive as was, advertised. But this here is, if you want to learn more about this, if we want to know how to do it, look at this documentation. I didn't write it, it's someone else's thing. Go look at that. Don't bother me with these questions. No. At least other things that are actually built into the thing have a bit more on it. Once you've got a scriptable object, if you don't remember how that's done, click on this. So this, I think, takes it just back to another page. Yeah, item picker. So this is all right. This part of the documentation I haven't looked over, and I don't think it's got any major issues because it looks like it's actually got what it needs. And this one here links to his other documentation, which is his own one. So that's fair enough. I can understand that. But linking to someone else's one because you're too lazy to put in, hey, this is how it works with my system. Here's how you can set it up. Like, go learn this to actually learn the basics of that system. But then once you've done that, come back here, and this is how you use it in my system. This is how it's implemented. This is what you can do with it. That's what you want to see from documentation or tutorials. And that's just what we're not seeing, even though it says that there's complete documentation. And again, so looking at his replies where he just basically says, oh, look, you're doing something wrong with the transitions, go learn Unity Animator, or like there's nothing wrong with the engine, you're just doing it wrong. Okay, I know I already said that I think I'm doing it wrong, but tell me how I should actually approach it and how I should fix it. I'll just change the transitions. Okay, so change the transitions to what? It's your engine, you know it better than anyone else. You should be able to explain that to us. But instead, this guy Boom Shaka does a great job of explaining it to anyone who's new and actually doesn't understand much about the Unity Animator, which is great. And thank you for that, Boom Shaka. If you watch this video, I don't know if you will, but whatever. All right, this has gone on for far too long, so I will stop it there. I was actually going to go into a little bit more about responding to areas. This is another one where there's a... See, I'm conflicted here because I do like the dev. The dev's done a great job on the product and the other products that they've brought out, but they do suffer from their own issues where they do get upset about another dev, and there was basically a dev war in a sense. I don't think it blew that far out of proportion, but it just as an example is what not to do if you're an asset dev. If we scroll down, there's pretty good reviews. There's a few reviews where he's replied to, and there's a few reviews where people are like, I don't like this, it hasn't worked properly, and he's gone in and explained, yeah, look, you can do this. They were good feedback that he was getting, and his replies were actually quite normal. But there was an issue. If we scroll down to where I've got highlighted here, a member has actually come on from another one, and it's just basically left a 1-star review, which was, fair enough, he's put in a lot of reasons as to why. I haven't gone quite through it, but he's just made a lot of accusations like a toxic community, and there is a little bit of toxicity in a lot of these communities that come through. You're always going to have that bad riffraff come through, but for the most part, my experience has been pretty good, and I always try and keep that pretty good for people. I make tutorials on the thing, and I try and help people along and encourage them with their development. He makes a lot of comments about how terrible everything is, and then you need this and that, which aren't true, but aren't necessarily not based in. They're his experience, so I don't want to argue against him because that's his opinion, and that's what he takes from it. The factual stuff he could probably argue against, but his opinion's his opinion. That's fine. Now, what's happened here though is the devs actually contacted back with evidence that attacking the character of the reviewer. Okay, I get that he's locked in this sort of situation where he believes that someone else has stolen the materials that he's created for his thing and come up with their own assets or through like asset piracy, basically, or just like reworking their engine and putting it up as their own, which is a valid claim if it is true. He's allowed to have that opinion and take it through the legal channels, but he's put that here as the answer to the review. So what he's tried to do here is highlight the issue as he sees it, and then also, basically accuse someone of stealing the code. So make the accusation quite public, and then say you can either believe his review or check out, this, which are things. So he's tried to combat it with like, here's evidence that sort of disprove what he's saying, but at the same time he's also attacking the character of the reviewer, which I don't think is the best way to do it. I think if you actually do just showcase, you go, those things aren't correct, or like, okay, I see that you have these issues with it, but here's like examples of where it is. So, this is you argue the points that are raised. You don't attack the character of the person, which he's tried to do by basically saying that this guy's an admin of the rival asset store owner, which, I mean, in itself has some validity to it. Like if he is part of another asset thing, then he does have a bias towards it, and people should know that. But again, it's not up to him to put it out there. Just leave the review as it is, and then just put down like the counter arguments to the arguments. That's the better way with doing it. Otherwise, it just sort of looks bad, because this whole thing, if you know more about it, if you're part of the communities, you'll see that there was a lot more to it, and it's not really anyone's place in the community other than the two devs that are involved and Unity itself. So yeah, a lot of other ones are great reviews. No support multi-map. So this one here, he hasn't tried to attack the character of the person that's done it. He's just said that's not true. Here's the answer to prove that it's not true. Which is fair enough, and it's a 1 star, so you can figure from that person was obviously really unhappy with the product straight away, probably didn't even seek help, just said it's not working for me, I'm scrapping it for whatever reason. So look, overall there's a lot of ways of dealing with things, and the customer dev relationship is oftentimes tedious. There's a lot of times when customers ask a lot of a developer that simply aren't within the scope of what the developer owes out from their asset. So there is definitely a balance there between who should do what. I just think that when you try and advertise something as like, oh, this is the best solution, and then it's got everything in it that you need, but then when people look into it, they're like, well, hang on a minute, why does this not work when it says that this is everything? It just becomes that you're going to end up with a lot of issues, and those issues need to be addressed. And really all he needs to do is just adjust some of the documentation, maybe add in a few more tutorial videos, which I believe may come in time. I'm not going to say that this has only just come out in the past month. He does claim that he's been working on it for 2 years, so if he's working on it for 2 years, surely you would have enough scope to have created tutorials along the way, or have them ready to go after launch, because there's no real bug fixing. As he says, nothing's wrong with the engine. The other issue as well was actually in one of the other responses that he gave was, feel free to contact me if you have issues with this. And then in the other one, it's like, contact me if you've got issues, but you've told me again that the engine is bad. Now, one of the things that I said in my review, which I've forgotten to finish off with, this is what I'm talking about, being fobbed off and all that sort of stuff. There's also other instances here where people have given less reviews and he's demanded a star. He goes like, surely that's not worth the loss of 1 star. I'll find that in just a second. I'll move on that shortly. Yeah, he's basically just said like, oh, like I told you that you could contact me, with issues and run around. It's like, well, no, you told me to contact you with issues if I have issues with the engine not working, but you've said it's not the engine's fault. So why would I contact you if it's not the engine's fault and it's my fault? And all you're going to tell me is adjust your transitions. If you have to tell me specifically, oh, here's how you adjust your transitions, why not just put that in the documentation so that anyone else who has that question, which on the forums there was 3 or 4 questions about it beforehand, possibly 3. I can't remember the exact number, but I did find some. And people have gone off and had to find their own solution. If you knew that there was a problem with it, or that people weren't getting that message across, perhaps you would look at that and adjust your documentation to meet those requirements, so that people would be a lot happier with the product. But you didn't. All you said is that no, you need to go learn transitions. I'm not going to spend the time to figure that out for people, and I just find that that's a bit unfair. So what I've got here is the 5-star rating. So let's just have a look at. I believe strongly in that the ratings, you never ask someone to give you a 5-star rating. You let people give you the rating. If they give you a rating that you don't think is fair, you comment in the reply and you say, hey, look, this is me addressing these issues. You can either don't ask them to adjust their rating. Go, just put down the facts and argue the whatever they've put forward as the causes for giving that rating. You put down the thing of like, okay, well, this is the answer. Reply to that, or yes, I'll look into that, and hopefully in the future you'll change your mind. But that's just so that anyone reading it can actually look and go, oh, okay, well, these are the issues that have come up. They're pretty serious issues, or they're not serious issues, but here's the response to them, and there's fixes for them in the works, or this is going to happen. I'm happy with that. I'll take the product and I'll wait for those fixes to come through. But if you look and you go like, I've got to find it here. Hang on. So let's try and find where it's mentioned. Yes, thanks for you. I'm glad it's working all right. Let me know if you run into problems. I'll be happy to help, and maybe I'll get that 5th star. You don't need the 5th star. 4 stars is pretty damn good. 4 out of 5 is a good rating. This I think is actually something to do with the Unity Asset Store's marketing system as well. Like if you get less than a 5-star, you fall out of the bracket of the featuring thing, or maybe there's some sort of like thing where you need to be an A-lister. You need to have those 5-star ratings for your assets, and if you don't have that 5-star rating, then you drop behind on some sort of back end mechanic for the Unity Asset Store system, which is why because I've seen it before. I actually tried looking up. One of the other devs that I'd seen ask for that 5-star, or basically demand it, going, I don't believe that that's worth like minusing a star. And you're like, no, that's not how you deal with someone with a review. I've actually seen someone go, oh, I'm really sorry, like I want to adjust that, and I've put it a thing going, are you fucking serious? Like you can't ask someone to adjust their rating and tell them off and bully them into it. That's not going to work. Now this isn't actually bullying. This is sort of them like pleading like, oh, hey, maybe you give me that 5th star. But it just sort of, to me, it's like, no, you don't deserve the 5th star. It's granted to you. You should be grateful to get 5 stars, but you should also be grateful for a good review. It shouldn't matter whether you get the 5 stars or not. But again, I'm saying that this is probably listed to something that I don't know about, which might be a star rating system in the back end of the Unity Asset Store that might be more prevalent with people that are like the big sale asset developers, like this Small Mountains guy with his Corgi engine has been around for years, and that's obviously sold a lot. There's a lot more reviews of that than the 13 reviews that have listed for this one in the past month. So there might be something at their level of Unity Asset Store developing. They have another system where they need to battle each other for 5-star ratings across the board to get them ahead of the other players ahead of the other asset devs for whatever reason that it is. Maybe they get more marketing offers, or they get featured more, or whatever it is that helps them make sales. Which I'm assuming that has to be the reason for that. Otherwise, you should never beg for stars, and you should never demand them either. The star rating is something that us as consumers of assets have that allow us to give proper feedback to something. And again, I've given 2 stars here, and I've mentioned that. I go like, look, I will continue on with this product because I've said at the start, I go, look, the system is there, but what's being marketed to people and what people are expecting from it is not there as far as I'm concerned. But I will keep developing with it. I will start working on solutions to some of the problems that I've had, and then I will share those solutions with the community to increase the ability for people to actually use this product, so you use this asset and use it effectively. Because without that and without the proper tutorials, you really are just putting something out there that's for the high-end user that can, not high-end user, sorry, it's the wrong word, the more professional developer, the more experienced developers that know how to use these systems the way they want and design everything from scratch themselves. But when you look at this is listed as a complete project and system. See, this is the thing, when you see this, it's not in, you can have a look, there's templates, there's another one. So you've got systems and templates, and they're roughly the same thing. Like, you get systems don't have templated wizards and things like that, whereas templates do. You just change the art assets on the templates and it's sort of drop and play. But when you look at the way that this thing's set up, it's basically, it's got design with the game feedback, and it's literally, you can just do this and do that with it, and everything's running perfectly fine as it is, and it should be really super simple to put it in there, especially if you're a Unity beginner, like new to Unity or an experienced developer. No, it's only if you're an experienced developer, whether that's moderate to excessive experience. It's debatable, but a new user will come into this and not understand why the documentation that it's telling them to do something isn't working. They're going to ask the same questions as I am, they're going to get the same results as I am, and they're going to be pissed off. Anyway, again, that's all I wanted to say on this episode. I do have more gripes I can go over with other things, but I'll save them for another video. Again, if you've watched through all of this and seen all of my stuff, thank you. Please comment below if you've only watched parts of it because you couldn't be bothered going through my lengthy explanations that take an hour and 30 minutes to get through. Perfectly understandable. Feel free to comment again as well if it's something that I've addressed in the video. Maybe I'll give you a timestamp, and so that you can see the response there. Otherwise, don't comment at all or just downvote it. Tell me that you don't want to see it again. That's perfectly fine. I'm not working this channel for monetization. I'm just working this channel because it's my own personal channel and I like giving out hobby tutorials. I like playing games. So that's why you see a vast array of random shit on my channel, including this. Anyway, again, thanks for watching. I'm going to sign off there so I can upload this. Hopefully it gives some insight into the way I think about the video games industry currently. I can make more of them as well. Anyway, I'm going to shut up now. I'm talking too much. Thanks for watching.